Renault Duster. The appearance of the Renault Duster turned out to be not a genius of the modern automotive industry, but also not bad for the budget car market. But as the operation progresses, there is no trace of the initial brilliance, and indeed, the Duster has the most problems with the body. One has only to look at some native body seams, and only one thing comes to mind: they were in a hurry. You check a used Duster before you buy, and it looks like the car has been in a major accident. And no, all other cars have exactly the same seams. This does not lead to anything bad, and in general this cannot be attributed to the weak points of the model. However, this imprint on the manufacturer's attitude is not the most positive, and the shaft of owner's claims to the quality of the bodywork is by no means groundless. First of all, the concern is the paintwork itself, or rather its resistance to the external environment. After 100 TkM of intensive use, the car looks not just not fresh, but simply hackneyed, as it is everywhere covered with scratches from everything that touched the body: grass, clothes, bag, even dust. If you add the rear arches strewn with chips to everything else, then purely for aesthetic reasons, you don't want to buy such a car at all. Anyway, it seems like the car has at least 300,000 miles on the odometer. Already a couple of years after the start of ownership, the driver's door seal wipes the paintwork to the very metal, and, what is even more unpleasant, the bare steel immediately begins to aggressively rust. In other matters, the same applies to chips on the arches. Duster also contracted Logan's well-known diseases, the most unpleasant of which are cracks at the joints of body panels. It is worth noting here that the crossover contingent got SOSO. Many are Caravites who listen to Dacia radio perceive the Duster as a real off-road vehicle, trying to storm all types of off-road terrain from geometric obstacles to fords. As a result, the body cannot withstand diagonal twists and gives slack in the most unprotected places. Among the entire line of power units, the 2-liter F4 has turned out to be the most demanded engine on the market, because, frankly, it's hard for the rest to carry almost a 1.5-ton barn. For the sake of comfort and safety, you will have to sacrifice a little wallet. Weaknesses in such an engine are slightly more than the rest. Most often, the F6 fails the ignition coils, the pan gasket and the phase regulator valve are leaking. You can live with this. Replacing any of the above will cost no more than an oil change. By about 100 TkM, the gas distribution clutch begins to chirp, hinting at an early rest and replacement of the gear. What you definitely shouldn't worry about is the resource of the piston group, declared by the manufacturer of 300 TkM. The 2-liter Duster runs without a hitch. The K4M motor, tested by taxi drivers in Logan, cannot boast of traction at all, but there will be much less problems with it. By and large, there are two systematic malfunctions. The ignition coils still do not live here for a long time, and the overloaded left support of the unit sags too early. Both are marked by a noticeable vibration, and only in the first case the check engine will report a problem. The restyling of 2015 did not replace the K4M with the more technically advanced Nissan H4M HR16DE with 2-phase shifters and a chain. The manufacturer chose not to solve the problem with the support, and so it will do. A fragile exhaust manifold gasket and a whistling belt of mounted units on early runs also added to the weak points. The notorious 1.5-liter French diesel engine K9K is a very rare guest under the hood of Renault Duster. He does not annoy with the problems of the units already listed, but he did not acquire his own at all. If you refuel in proven places and change consumables on time, then you won't have to repair a diesel engine for a long time. Renault Duster gearboxes are what you need. There are no problems with them even under the condition that some owners of cars in manual transmission use the first gear only as a lower gear, and under normal conditions they start immediately from the second one. At the same time, the clutch calmly endures 150 TkM, as if it were meant to be. There are no problems with the 4-speed ancient automatic either. However, if you do not periodically change the oil, then after 100 to 150 TkM you can run into the first tangible kicks when switching. This is how solenoid valves clogged with where products stick. Being engaged in auto selection, very often you have to watch the Dusters, who were deliberately or unintentionally mocked, trying to push the city crossover into a puddle of mud up to the very windows. Clay on the stretcher, spars, in the cabin. Are you even aware that in fact it is front-wheel drive, and the electromagnetic clutch is only to secure your ride? I'm trying to hear something logical in response from the seller. No. Most Duster owners are convinced that they own a Jeep, and a Jeep should be able to go anywhere. And this misconception has led to more complaints about the transmission than it should be. Yes, there were defective oil seals on the Duster. Yes, there was a warranty replacement for the firmware of the all-wheel drive ECU, but knocking and vibrating crosses and burnt clutch friction discs are the merit of ignorant, sometimes quite narrow-minded owners. The reliability of the Duster chassis will directly depend on the type of drive chosen. In the case of the front, there are a little less problems, since a terribly simple torsion beam is installed at the back, planted on two fat silent blocks. One way or another, there is still something to break. For example, shock absorbers and springs were not ready for a 1.5-ton load. The first break through and flow for 1 or 2, the second sag. It is the rear elements that pass especially quickly, being marked by a buildup in the first tens of thousands of kilometers, while bearings live a little longer, about 60 tkm. All other parts of the suspension are a little more enduring, even if you have an all-wheel drive Renault Duster with a multi-link rear. By 100,000 kilometers, its silent blocks are already noticeably tired and the car begins to float in a straight line. It responds worse to steering. Fans of geometric off-road have such problems even earlier. The rubber bands are simply squeezed out of their seats by levers. And there are a dime a dozen such copies on the used car market. What can we say? In our practice of auto selection, almost a third of the examined Dusters have traces of hay transportation in the trunk. The Duster's steering is a bargain. Finding a copy with no leaks or at least fogging is almost impossible, and, in fact, there is no need. Less often, the steering rack and the pipes connecting them snap. The most important thing is to monitor the fluid level. If it does not fall, then all of the above can be scored until the oil starts to leave. What definitely cannot be pulled is with the replacement of steering tips and rods. They live about 100 tkm. You can find out about their death by a noticeable backlash and knocks when taxiing. There is nothing to break in the Duster's cabin. As well as with the body, due to super-budget materials, the interior is rapidly losing its aesthetic qualities. Plastic is quickly covered with scratches, upholstery with water stains, pseudochrome flies off the deflectors with flakes. But everything works as it should, without hitches. An air conditioner can become less effective over time. The matter usually lies outside, namely in the condenser, which, as bombardments by stones and insects, loses the connecting plates. The best protection in this case is a mosquito net on the bumper grill. As we already said, after the first 100 Duster looks like a miner tired by the end of the day. Even neat owners are sometimes unable to maintain their former external attractiveness without polishing the body and dry cleaning the interior. However, if you take a closer look and approach the purchase properly, it becomes clear that all these points can be solved relatively inexpensively. By and large, cosmetic repairs are always required. Most often you need to solve minor issues with the suspension and oil leaks on a 2-liter engine. Otherwise, Renault Duster is ready to go at least another 200,000 kilometers without capital investment. Renault Duster's big problem is the owners. Finding a truly live copy on the used car market is very difficult. Often come across frankly killed hackneyed options that were absolutely not serviced, painted in the cheapest paint shops. There are those who simply ride with leaking rear shock absorbers, not noticing the buildup at all. Mostly older people. A kind of attraction for pensioners.